Hey, welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to do a shoe battle between these two shoes. This is the Alfred Sargent Moore in cherry red, and this is your Loake export grade Trinity in deep mahogany. So both Adelaide's, both really interesting shoes with a little bit of differences, and let's get started. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and our channel we talk about men's dress wear. It's all about footwear, and we talk about unboxing videos, general shoe knowledge, helping you understand the industry and what's happening with your shoes. We look at shoes critically to determine whether or not they're worth the price that they charge. We compare shoe to shoe to understand which one is the best of the same category, and then I interview experts in the field to get their take as well. Check out my playlists to see all my videos. Welcome back. This is Wisconsin Shoe Guy, and today we're going to look at the Alfred Sargent Adelaide and talk a little bit about how it compares to some others. I'm going to actually break this into different videos as I do it, but I'm going to be doing them in a row. One of my watchers actually suggested that I have a categorization where I look at the last and I look at some of the structural things like the sole and things like that separately. Then I look at the quantitative measurements. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do that for each of these. So I'm just going to repeat this piece in each of the videos as I compare this shoe to several others. So with that said, here we go. So the Alfred Sargent Moore is an Adelaide. It is a cap toe Adelaide. So Adelaides can come with a cap toe or it can come with a medallion toe. I've never seen them with a plain toe, but I'm sure that that's possible as well. They have heel counters usually, although that is also an option. So like there's an Edmonds Adelaide called the Cornwallis that does not have heel counters. And actually has a medallion, right? But no cap. So there's a lot of different options that you can do. As we look at this particular one, we are going to look at the last first. Now the last is a very important part of the shoe, right? It is the overall shape and is going to give you the overall impression of the shoe when it's on the ground. This is especially important for hole cuts because hole cuts have very little adornment, right? They're just a plain piece of leather. And so the last is going to be what overall is the shape of the shoe. Well, that's true on a cap toe Oxford as well. The cap toe Oxford has a cap, but the vamp here really gets its structure and shape from the last. And so you can have a hole cut shoe or a cap toe Oxford shoe that can look like a clog, or you can have one that looks like a very sleek piece of footwear. So it's important to note. So as we look at the last here, this is a good sweeping last. It has a nice line as it comes back toward the heel. Okay, so the way that it gradually goes back is really good. It has plenty of room here for your foot. So I have a relatively wide foot, and I actually sized down for this in order to be able to get it. So the ball is a little bit on the tight side, but the rest of the shoe, the volume at the front is really, really good for my foot. A little bit of pinching here on my pinky toe, which I may have to put a shoe stretcher in order to accommodate, but so far so good. The heel is nice and tight, so you get that nice splush when you put your foot in. You know, use a shoehorn, right? Everybody says that. I don't always, but what I do is I hold the back of it as I pull it onto my foot. And I do like to have the splush to make sure that my heel is secure, because nothing is worse than having the heel slide on your foot. If that happens, then you get blisters, and that sucks. So, anyway, the other thing that I really like about lasts is the way the toe is like a chisel, right? So this has this part here, it narrows, and then it has a relatively flat part here. Now it's not a square. Sometimes they'll call this a soft square. And there is a lot of variety when it comes to this in shoes. So as you look at this series of videos with the Alfred Sargent compared to the other one, you'll see that there are some that are more rounded than others and some that are quite sharp. Now that is also true here, where it rises on the sides. So that can be a really big change in the shoe. So as the last goes, right, you have the way the toe is, you have the sides, okay, and then you have the shape here, the sweeping part, okay, and then of course you have the heel and how well that fits to your foot. Okay. Now, some shoes are going to have a high instep last and some are going to have a low instep last. What does that mean? It means that the amount of leather here can vary. A lot of times what people want is they want a shoe that has very little in the way of a V-gap, okay, where this part just comes together very, very closely. And that can look really good, but a V-gap doesn't mean that the shoe doesn't fit you well. Sometimes if you have no V-gap up here, the shoe can be much too big. So it's a real catch-22, right? I prefer to have it with very little V-gap, but at the same time, if there's no V-gap and they come together, that's sometimes a sign that the shoe is too big. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at sizing and trying to keep it in. Now, the other piece, of course, is that leather does stretch, so you could have a V-gap on day one. I have a pair of CNES Adelaides that when I first got them, the V-gap was about 1.5 inches, and now it's down to almost 0. So again, it depends on the quality of the leather and how much they'll stretch. The higher end shoes stretch less, but they still stretch. It's leather, right? So something to consider. So anyway, so that's the last. So let's look at the sole. This is part of the Alfred Sargent exclusive range and has a really nice sole. It has a beveled waist, has a blind stitch sole. Now, this is also made with an oak bark tanned sole. So the leather is very, very long lasting. I have another pair of these that I've had for about a year, and the wear is about the same as this. So it just wears off the ink that you do when you wear it the first couple times, and then it will just last and last and last and last. This is now, like if you look at a JR sole, that's a double oak bark tanned, and that will last longer, but this is also much better than, you know, some of your chrome tan soles or something like that is available on some other shoes. Now, how long should a sole last? This is a really, really hard question to answer because soles are really dependent on the way you walk. It's your the surface that you're walking on. It's your weight, the way you walk. Sometimes people have they walk like this. Okay, and so you can wear down the sole here, and it doesn't really matter where you wear the sole down first. Once the sole is worn down in one particular area, it's time to replace it. You know, you can't replace part of the sole. I know some people have done things where they replace only the front half and so forth, and you can do that, and it saves some money, but it really doesn't lengthen the length of the sole because you do want to make sure that you're using the same stitch holes on the welt. Otherwise you have to replace the welt, and when you replace the welt, that actually diminishes the life of the sole a lot, which is another reason that a lot of people prefer to go to a cobbler instead of sending their shoes to the factory, because the factories have to put so many shoes through the rotation that they'll actually remove the welts and put new welts on because it's actually faster for them. So something to consider. So like when I used to send my shoes to Allen Edmonds to have them recrafted, and it's a fine practice, right? But the shoes can only be recrafted 3 times, and then after that, and I've actually had it where on the second time they were too tight, and it was because the new welt went on and it was just a little bit tighter. So food for thought. But anyway, this is the Alfred Sargent. That is the last. That is the sole. You can see the heel here has this beautiful split here with a lot of leather and a little bit of rubber. That actually helps it wear down slower, which is all about extending the life of the shoe. So that is the Alfred Sargent. This is the Loake Trinity. Okay, the Loake Trinity last has a more rounded view than the Loake, right? So when you look at them side by side, you can see that there's a significant difference there. So this is a chisel last, this is a round last, almost like an almond last, but not quite pointed enough, I would say, for an almond last. And then when you look at it this way, you can see that it does have a good amount of sleekness in this, and the sweeping line to the back is really good. You can see the heel caps on this are round instead of peaked. What does that mean? You can see this has the little peak on this, on the Alfred Sargent. This one is round. It has a small seam in the back instead of a whole seam. All right. But from a last perspective, this is a pretty good one. They call this a fiddleback waist, but it's more of what I would consider to be a beveled waist on the sole. And you can see this one here has a similar bevel waist. Now the Alfred Sargent is blind stitched, and this is an open channel, so you can see the stitching. Now it's important to note that after you wear the blind stitch shoe for a few months, or maybe a year, depending on how often you wear it, you will actually see the stitches. They do come through as the weather wears down. So that's really an aesthetic thing when the shoe is new, but it does change the way it is, like at the arch and stuff where the shoe doesn't wear down. So that is an interesting piece there. As you look, this is of course painted, and the Alfred Sargent is not. It also has the split leather heel with the rubber, and if you look at it, there is a little bit more rubber on it, which sometimes will make it wear down more, sometimes not. It really depends on how you walk. When you walk on the heel, right? If you happen to walk on the leather, then the leather will wear down more. If you happen to walk on the rubber, then the rubber will wear down more. The leather will last longer than the rubber, right? Now the cool thing about this is you can just replace the rubber. They basically pull off the rubber and the leather, and then they put the leather back on top of a new piece of rubber and just hammer it back in. So that's another thing that can do, and that's kind of service your local cobbler can do. So, you know, when your heels wear down, you don't need new shoes, you need new heels. So, so as you're looking at this last, you know, the U-throat on here is good. I would say that the top line of these shoes, and when I say top line, that means this part here. That's how high it goes up. These are symmetrical top line. It's technically asymmetrical because this is a little bit higher than this, but not terribly so. This one's a little bit less asymmetrical than the Loake. The top line on them is roughly the same. It's not a big difference. Sometimes you'll see shoes as you look through the series. There are some shoes, especially on the higher end, that have a much bigger differential in the symmetry, and you can really see it easily. So anywho, you know, the beveled waist though on the Loake is very nice. That is something that not a lot of shoes have. The finishing on the sole and stuff like that I'll talk about in a different part of the video. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at some of the finishing on these shoes. So we're going to start with the Alfred Sargent. And I think that the Alfred Sargent has a good amount of finishing, but some of it is left intentionally plain. And so that's going to be part of what we're looking at today, is what is left intentionally plain, and what is not. So we're going to start with the pinking, right? And the pinking is the area along the cap, along the edge, along the top line. And I'm going to say that this pinking is relatively fine. I do find it helpful to actually measure the pinking, because sometimes that can help determine whether it's actually finer or not. And this is looking at like 3mm pinking, and it is consistent across the whole shoe. When it comes to fudging, and fudging is along the edge here on the top of the welt, when they take that wheel and they put in that really nice pattern, there is no fudging on the Alfred Sargent at all, not even on the inside. So it's just it's relatively straightforward. Now the sole edge itself, which is right here, right? This has been finished. So it has a ridge at the top, and it has a ridge at the bottom. Okay, and you can feel that. And then when it comes to actually by the waist where it's beveled, the sole has like a rounded edge along the edge there. So it's rounded here, or beveled, okay? And then it's ironed with the groove at the top and the bottom all the way around here. So it's like a 180 iron, and then the rest of that 270 is got that bevel shape to it. Now, the heel itself, somebody used a wheel and artistically did a little finishing piece on the edge there as well. As I stated earlier, the heel cap, or the heel counter, is actually in two pieces with a seam down the middle. There is stitching on either side of that seam instead of just having a plain seam, and of course there's the flap over the top as well, which is pretty common on these. The counter actually extends beyond the heel. These heels, as I said before, are actually really short, and usually they that centimeter where it is short is normally taken up by the heel actually going out there. So that's an interesting detail there. I think they wanted to make room for the bevel. That's just my opinion, but again, I'm not a shoemaker. I have no idea in terms of why they would do that, so that's just my assumption in looking at it. And of course, we said on the sole before, the sole is beautiful, has all this, you know, it has the bevel waist, and it has this, you know, blind stitch on there as well. When we look at extras, you know, there isn't a lot of hand stitching. When it comes to the skiving, and what skiving is when you put a toe cap on, and you know they don't actually have the leather going all the way underneath, so the cap doesn't go over. They're actually joining two pieces of leather here. What they do is they thin the leather so that this gap from the cap to the vamp is as thin as possible. And I'm going to say that they did not skive this extremely thin. When I look at some of my other shoes, which I'll look at in my in the different battles here, I know that is actually thinner. Now, in terms of actually measuring it, I can't tell whether that's actually a whole millimeter of thickness or not. I will tell you that it's thicker than my tape. Okay, so I'm gonna say it's more than a millimeter, and I'm gonna use that as my judge, right? Is it thicker than the tape? Can I still feel the tape when I put the tape on top of it? And in this case, I do. So that's gonna say I'm gonna say that those edges are on the thick side, on the Alfred Sargent. In terms of other pieces, that's the last things we're gonna measure are the density of the stitches. Okay, and this is just a very, very straightforward measurement. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5. 4.5 stitches per centimeter across the top here. I always measure at the cap toe on Adelaide's because it's always the same. And then when it comes to the sole, this is normally 3. For the sole, it is, I'm going to say 3.5, almost 4. Almost 4 stitches per centimeter on the sole. So that is the Alfred Sargent. Talk about the finishing on the Loake. You know, I think that if the first thing that we look at is the pinking, and as I look at the pinking is relatively large. I'm going to say it is about 3 millimeters. But beautiful pinking all the way around. And this is on the upper, the counter, the U-throat, and the cap. And they do a pretty nice job with it. When we look at the fudging, there is no fudging on the top of the weld. So they didn't do that at all with this shoe. So relatively straightforward. I think that this is a no muss, no fuss kind of thing. They did a 180-degree iron on the edge. Okay. And there is a groove at the top and at the bottom of the edge. Although with wear, the top has pretty much smoothed down, so it's not very thick, and the bottom feels like it is only maybe half of what it is on the Alfred Sargent. So I think that that's an important thing. There's also a bevel at the waist, so that it's not ironed there, and the same finishing aspect on the heel as you have on the Alfred Sargent. This has a single piece of leather for the heel cap, so the clicking is a little bit more complex, and they've got a small seam here at the bottom of that heel cap as they attach it. Let's see, I don't see anything on here that is hand stitched. The skiving, when I did the comparison of Loake versus Loake, I could tell that the skiving on this Loake Trinity was much better than it was on the Loake Evans. When I put the tape down to measure the distance, I can't feel the edge of the toe cap does not actually feel thick here. So what I did was I put the tape across it, and then I rub my finger, and it feels like it's smooth. It feels like it's going the same thing. So that means that the skiving is only the 1 millimeter thick, and it's not catching my finger the rest of the way. So that's an interesting piece of finishing that they did, which is nicer on the Loake Trinity. And of course the heel actually goes the same length as the heel cap, so there's a symmetry that they do there. You know, in terms of symmetrical, now that I look at this and I look at it on a balanced basis, there is a small degree of asymmetry here. So if you look here, you can see that you can see more of the shoe tree handle on the outside than you can on the inside. So that asymmetry is also part of the finishing, part of the design. So I had that as part of the last discussion, but I didn't bring it up with the shoe because I didn't notice it. So that's something that I think is another piece as well. So let's take a look at the stitch density on the Loake. Stitch density is pretty thick. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 stitches per centimeter on the upper, which is better than it was on the Alfred Sargent. So that's another piece that is interesting to look at. And then let's take a look at the stitch density on the sole. And because this has an open channel, it's a little easier to look at because I can actually just look at the sole side. I don't have to dig into the welt. And for this, I have a solid 3 stitches per centimeter. So not as dense on the sole. So that is the finishing on the Loake Trinity. So, in conclusion, which of these is the better shoe? Well, again, they have very different lasts. If you prefer the chisel last, this shoe is just not going to do. But at $690 versus $565, it's definitely worth looking at what those differences are. From a stitch density perspective, this is a better shoe. From a clicking, cutting, finishing perspective, this is a better shoe. From a sole perspective, the Alfred Sargent has it beat. It has a narrow waist, it has a blind stitch sole, it has a better sole material, which should allegedly last longer, okay? From a style perspective, this has a chisel last, it has peaked on the heel caps, and is very, very close to very, very expensive shoes, where this does not look like a very expensive shoe. It is an Adelaide, and Adelaides are very much in vogue and very stylish, okay? The deep mahogany color is very good. The quality of the leather is very good, but it is a very conservative style. So if that's what you like, then the Alfred Sargent is no substitute, and you should just buy this shoe. So I am not going to call this a draw. I am going to say that for me, the most important thing in the Adelaide is the shape of the shoe and the design of the shoe. And I like the fact that this has a rise here, it has 2 rises here, that the sweeping view of the shoe and the chisel nature of the shoe, I like the way that that looks better. Okay, so for me, that $690 is fine for what that is, compared to the 565. Now, very few of us buy shoes at list prices. We're always finding deals. So here's the trick, right? If you're able to find this for $250 and you find this for $300, what are you going to do? If money is a main motivator, and it usually is, okay, this shoe is really, really good, okay? Technically, it is a better shoe in a lot of ways to the Alfred Sargent. Now, I can't tell, okay, whether this leather, whether this sole versus this leather and this sole are really better, okay? Hopefully, in a 6-month review and a 12-month review, I'll have a better ability to be able to give that type of feedback. I've had this shoe for a year, and it looks almost as in good a shape as this shoe that I've had for a month, okay? Now, have I worn it more? I have worn the shoe that I've owned a year or more, but I don't wear my shoes a lot. So it's not like a year of wear where it was in my rotation twice a week, right? So, but still, there is a lot to be said for it. So pound for pound, if price is your motivator, both shoes are equal. You should definitely buy whatever you can get cheaper. But if style is your issue, this style is really, really hard to beat for this price. Okay, and so that is the shoe battle. I hope you like it. Let me know your feedback, and really appreciate everyone taking the time to watch.